Before we begin, I thought it would be fun if everyone lets me know in the comments where they're watching this video from. And while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe. Now let's start today's episode. Anna Palmer. Anna Palmer was a 10-year-old girl living in Salt Lake City, Utah, in 1998. She was known for her outgoing personality and enjoyed spending time with neighborhood friends. On the evening of September 10, 1998, Anna called her mother, Nancy, who was at work, to ask for permission to play outside. Nancy agreed, and around 5 p.m., Anna walked a few houses down to meet her friend, Roxanne. The two girls spent time together at a nearby park before Anna decided to head home around 7 p.m., wanting to adhere to her mother's rules. As they walked back, an unfamiliar man passed them on the street. Roxanne noticed that after they passed the man, he glared at Anna in an unsettling way. Shortly after, the two girls stopped by the house of another friend, Amy Johnson, to see her new kitten. After spending a short time there, Roxanne and Anna parted ways, each heading in different directions toward their homes. At 7 p.m., Nancy arrived home and was met with a horrifying sight, Anna lying motionless on the front porch. Immediately, she knew something was terribly wrong. Anna's face appeared waxy and pale, almost yellow, as if all the blood had drained from her body. Panicked, Nancy called 911 while attempting CPR under the dispatcher's guidance. However, her efforts were futile. Anna had a severe wound in her neck. The dispatcher then advised Nancy to cover the wound with her hand before continuing CPR. Minutes later, paramedics arrived and rushed Anna to the hospital. Unfortunately, Anna was already gone. She scratched her attacker, so she had his skin under her nails. The detectives kept it so they can use it when technology was more advanced. The residents of Salt Lake City was fearful, but also angry. If such a despicable act could happen to a girl as seemingly followed all the safety rules and who lived in a safe neighborhood, then no child was safe. In this religiously conservative state of Utah, people wanted immediately biblical retribution, so the police had to act fast. The police immediately started interviewing Anna's family and friends. Roxanne, who was with Anna, told police about a man she saw following Anna. Amy Johnson also told police that after Anna headed home, she noticed an unknown man walking with her, and he creeped her out. Other residents also noticed a young man, who no one knew in the area, had seemed drunk and out of place. Anna's family made a public appeal via the media for anyone with information to come forward. A reward of $11,000 was offered for any information that would lead to this case being solved. Despite all of this, the case went cold. In February 2009, the DNA evidence they had was entered into a database, and they immediately found a match. It led detectives to 32-year-old Matthew Brake. He was serving time in Idaho prison for an unrelated crime. When interviewed, Matthew admitted that he lived near Anna back in 1998. Back then he was 19 years old with no direction in life. He was a California native, but moved to Utah with his brother Tom after Tom's friend Todd Clark told the two that they would find steady employment there. Tom found a job, but Matthew did not. He spent most of his time drinking instead of looking for work. Seeing himself as a tough guy, he frequently instigated fights with others. In 1998, Matthew was charged with a violent felony in an unrelated case, but he served only a brief sentence in county jail. Crucially, his DNA was not collected during his incarceration, which could have drastically changed the timeline of Anna's case. On August 12, 2011, Matthew Brake pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Had authorities taken his DNA back in 1998, the case could have been solved almost immediately. Additionally, Todd Clark's wife had urged police to investigate Matthew after hearing about Anna's murder, but they never followed up on her tip. Now, Matthew is serving time in one of Utah's toughest prisons, and given the nature of his crime against a child, he faces the likelihood of being targeted by other inmates. Before I continue, I want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Now, let's move on with the video. Moving on to the next case. Donna Macho. Donna Macho was a 19-year-old legal secretary and part-time model who lived with her parents on Cherrybrook Lane in East Windsor, New Jersey. Her life seemed like the embodiment of the American dream. She was beautiful, well-liked in high school, and thriving after graduation. Those close to her said she was ambitious, hoping to turn her part-time modeling job into a full-fledged career. On the night of February 26, 1984, Donna was in the basement watching television when her younger sister joined her. The two watched a horror movie together until 2 a.m. Before heading to bed around 2:45 a.m., her sister left Donna still watching TV. Their mother and stepfather were asleep upstairs. That was the last time Donna was ever seen alive. Her sister later recalled that she didn't hear any unusual sounds or disturbances coming from the basement that night. Although it was a Sunday, Donna had mentioned to her family that she planned to go into the office to catch up on work. As a result, Donna's disappearance wasn't even noticed until later that evening. When she failed to return for dinner, her mother went downstairs to check on her. Upon entering the basement, she immediately sensed something was wrong. Donna's usually neat and orderly space had been disturbed, with items scattered around. To her, this suggested a possible struggle. Her fears escalated when she discovered a pile of clothes stained with blood. Overcome with panic, she quickly called the police. During the investigation, authorities located Donna's black 1979 Chrysler abandoned along Millstone Road near the Cranberry border. Inside the vehicle, they found her brown leather pocketbook resting on the seat, still containing her cash, credit cards, and driver's license. All 4 doors were unlocked, and police noted suspicious stains on both the upholstery and the ceiling of the car. Later, it was confirmed that the blood present on the automobile was that of the missing 19-year-old. Additionally, DNA evidence was found inside the apartment. However, as back in 1984, DNA technology was still in its infancy, no matches to any suspects could be found. Despite the plethora of bodily fluids found in the automobile, police had no leads and the case would eventually go cold. Then in April of 1995, over a decade since Donna had gone missing, a Boy Scout troop leader discovered a partially clothed skeleton while foraging in the area. The skeleton, wrapped in a carpet, was placed in the dense underbrush just off of George Davidson Road, not far from where Donna's car had originally been found. Using dental records, the skeletonized remains were eventually positively identified as belonging to the missing 19-year-old. An autopsy initially determined the cause of death to be a gunshot wound to the head. However, upon further inspection of Donna's remains, it was determined that while a head injury was the cause of her death, it was not definitively from a gunshot wound. Regardless, her death was officially ruled as a homicide. The family hired private investigators, trackers, and even psychics in an effort to find the person responsible, but all to no avail. The case would eventually again grow cold. Then nearly 40 years later in 2022, authorities reopened the case and all viable evidence was resubmitted to the New Jersey State Police Central Regional Laboratory. This included DNA evidence as well as fingerprints found on scene. In April of 2023, authorities announced that a man named Nathaniel Harvey was responsible for Donna Macho's murder. Identification was made through the semen left in Donna's apartment during the initial 1984 investigation. They determined his DNA was the only DNA evidence in the bedroom that should not have been there. Nathaniel Harvey had a lengthy criminal history. He had actually been a suspect in the case early on in the investigation, but due to lack of evidence and lack of DNA testing abilities, he was never charged. Over the years, Harvey had been arrested for several sexual assaults, as well as for another unrelated murder which occurred in June of 1985. Irene Schnaps, a 37-year-old widow, had been found dead in the bedroom of her garden apartment. Her body was found by a co-worker who went to her home after not hearing from her. Despite no unusual sounds being heard by neighbors, Irene's bedroom showed a gruesome scene with her body left nude for investigators to find alongside a bloody bed. Investigators concluded that her head had been struck with a blunt metallic object. A bloody fingerprint was also found on the pillowcase which had fallen to the floor. With no sign of a forced entry, police believe the attacker may have been someone Irene knew personally. A neighbor of Irene named Peter was initially considered a suspect after it was found he had a romantic interest in the woman. However, he was later cleared. At the time, Nathaniel Harvey entered unlocked houses where he would hold captive and sexual young women. He was brought in for questioning, and it was observed that he was wearing a shoe which was of a comparable size to the bloody shoe print discovered at the scene of the crime. Police also found a Seiko watch in Nathaniel's car. Police noted that a Seiko watch was found to be missing from the murdered Irene's apartment. According to police officers, after 3 days of exhaustive questioning, Nathaniel Harvey confessed to sexually assaulting and murdering Irene Schnaps. However, for reasons unknown to the media, this confession was neither recorded nor put in writing. Later, Nathaniel insisted that he actually had nothing to do with the murder. Nevertheless, he was tried and sentenced to death for the death of Irene. During his appeal, Harvey argued that he was not informed of his Miranda rights prior to the police interrogation. As a result, the New Jersey Supreme Court reversed his conviction. In 1994, he was retried and sentenced to death. In February 2007, New Jersey abolished the death penalty, and Nathaniel appealed his sentence again. After undergoing several legal proceedings, the case was eventually brought to the state's Supreme Court, which mandated the conduct of new DNA testing. In February 2015, following a Supreme Court mandate, Harvey was given the chance to stand trial for a third time in connection to Irene's murder. However, before the trial could take place, he passed away in prison in November 2020. Until his final days, he continued to assert his innocence in the Irene Schnaps case. His former attorney spoke to the media, emphasizing that no concrete evidence linked Harvey to the 1985 murder, stating, asterisk, other than the fact that Harvey did a lot of bad things. Asterisk. At the time of Irene's disappearance, while her family endured immense distress, Harvey had been living quietly in East Windsor. He was employed at the very farm where Donna's remains would later be found. Reflecting on the case, Donna's sister told the media, "I was relieved it was finally closed, but I was also furious. Furious that I hadn't stayed to help her fight. Furious that he could enter our home so easily. Furious that he wasn't in jail." She went on to express her frustration over Harvey's death, saying, "I was mad he died. He never had to truly pay for this. I'm glad the case is closed, and that it was him, but it still feels like he got away with it." Though justice was never fully served, after nearly 4 decades, the case was officially closed. Moving on to the next case. Esther Lucille Westenbarger. Esther Lucille Westenbarger spent most of her life in Fostoria, Ohio. She attended Fostoria High School and worked at Finley Industries, an automobile parts manufacturer, for nearly 2 decades. In 2009, Esther accepted a buyout from her employer and decided to move to Kokomo, Indiana, to be closer to her mother and siblings. Initially living with her mother, she later fell out with her and used the buyout money to secure her own place. One evening, she went out with new friends to go bar hopping. Esther parked her Cadillac outside a bar and was last seen walking on foot, presumably to retrieve her car. That was the last time she was seen, and her car was never found. After missing a surprise party she had planned for her mother, the family grew concerned and reported her missing on November 13, 2009. While her new friends were questioned, no new leads emerged. A man who lived near Esther raised suspicion due to his frequent run-ins with the law, but there was no evidence linking him to her disappearance, and he was released. Police were searching not only for Esther but also for her car, a Cadillac with a customized Ohio license plate reading, MS Esther. Unfortunately, neither Esther nor her car were ever located, and the case eventually went cold. Then, on June 17, 2020, Howard County 911 Dispatch Center received a call regarding a car that was found in a pond. A dive team was then used to retrieve the car. They noted that it was a Cadillac and that a female body was inside. When they saw the license plate, they already knew it was Esther. Nevertheless, DNA testing was done and was confirmed, and it was Esther Lucille Westenbarger. The leading theory is that because she had too much to drink, she accidentally drove into the pond. The police have said that foul play is not suspected. Her daughter Matilda Rood had this to say, "For me the past 10 years have been miserable. I can't answer it any other way. We go on with everyday life, but you never stop thinking about her and wondering. It's the questions, the why, what, how, and when. The questions constantly keep running through your head. Well, I now know the where and how. And so hopefully it'll help me finish this process of healing." Moving on to the next case. Ethel Shannon McCarson. Ethel Shannon McCarson was born in Rockmart, Georgia, a small town of about 4,000 residents located an hour northwest of Atlanta. As the youngest of 3 sisters, she was both creative and ambitious. From an early age, she developed a passion for painting and, by the age of 19, had earned her private pilot's license. However, at 21, while studying to become an airplane mechanic in Tulsa, Oklahoma, McCarson suffered a mental breakdown and was diagnosed with schizophrenia. As a result, she was forced to relinquish her pilot's license. Despite this setback, she continued painting, primarily creating artwork of flowers and horses. She occasionally traveled to northern Florida, selling her pieces at low prices. Over time, she became highly nomadic, frequently moving from town to town. Her travels led to several arrests in Florida, including charges of disorderly conduct and contempt of court in both Bay County and Panama City Beach. McCarson did not own a cell phone, instead borrowing phones from strangers when needed. She had no bank cards, was absent from social media, and relied on hitchhiking or Greyhound buses to get around. On April 4th, McCarson, now 42, took a bus and arrived in the Orlando Greyhound station on North John Young Parkway just after noon. It is believed that McCarson may have told someone on the bus with her why she was coming to Orlando in the first place and whether she was meeting someone there. After she got off the bus, the surveillance camera captured her. She was wearing a light-colored tank top, a scarf, and dark-colored pants. She was carrying a medium cross-body bag and a brown jacket. She walked outside, dropped her jacket on a patch of grass, and sat down on it. A woman in a short-sleeved red shirt and light-colored shorts walked up to her, and the two started talking. After about a minute and a half, a white car pulls into the parking lot and McCarson got up and walked away in the direction of the car. Whether she got into the car or continued walking somewhere else is not known. 2 days later, her remains were found in a wooded area near Old Winter Garden Road and North Cottage Hill Road in Orlando, Florida. Witnesses reported that McCarson's body had been decapitated and severed in half, with her arms and legs also removed. The woman seen speaking with McCarson is not considered a suspect in her death, but authorities are eager to determine what was discussed during their interaction. So far, the woman remains unidentified. A $10,000 reward is being offered for any information related to the case. Moving on to the next case. Leslie Pryor. In the quiet neighborhood of Chevy Chase, Maryland, a brutal murder shocked residents and left police baffled for over 2 decades. One morning in May 2001, Leslie Pryor, a 50-year-old mother and advertising executive, was discovered savagely beaten in her home. The crime scene was drenched in blood, yet filled with unanswered questions. With no leads or suspects, the case eventually went cold, until now. Years later, thanks to groundbreaking advancements in genetic genealogy, a shocking arrest was finally made. For those who knew and loved Leslie Pryor, the revelation was staggering. The person responsible for her tragic death had been hiding in plain sight all along. Leslie Jennings Pryor was cherished as a warm, devoted mother, wife, and professional. Her life appeared idyllic. She shared a loving marriage with her husband, Sandy Pryor, and had a deeply devoted daughter, Lauren. She worked at Specialties Incorporated, an advertising production company in Northwest D.C. Leslie and Sandy had built a life filled with shared joys, from summer vacations to simple family dinners around the kitchen island. But unknowingly, the Pryor family welcomed someone into their lives who would ultimately shatter their world. On May 2, 2001, what should have been an ordinary day took a devastating turn for 50-year-old Leslie Pryor. When she failed to show up for work, concern quickly spread among her coworkers and husband. The Montgomery County Police Department was dispatched to the Pryor family home on Drummond Avenue. Upon arrival, officers were met with a chilling sight: blood smeared in the foyer, yet no sign of Leslie. As they moved further inside, they uncovered a horrifying scene: Leslie Pryor's lifeless body in the main bedroom's shower. She had been attacked with brutal force, suffering multiple blunt force injuries and strangulation. Evidence of her desperate struggle was found beneath her fingernails, where her assailant's blood was mingled with her own. In addition to signs of manual strangulation, investigators noted distinct V-shaped cuts on her head, which matched the sharp edges of the foyer molding. This indicated where her head had been repeatedly battered. Investigators believe that the perpetrator carried her from the foyer, attempting to wash away the blood and minimize the mess. The scene had evidence of a hasty cleanup with luminescence tests revealing traces of blood in the foyer, a trash can, sinks in the kitchen and downstairs bathroom, and on door frames and the back door. The initial investigation into Leslie's violent end was thorough, but ultimately frustrating. Early DNA analysis was able to determine that the DNA collected at the scene belonged to an unknown male, but it did not match anyone in Leslie's immediate circle, including her husband Sandy. Leslie's daughter, Lauren, provided the police with a list of close family associates. Among the names on that list was the eventual perpetrator, though investigators did not immediately consider him a prime suspect. As the weeks turned into months, the case grew cold. The police continued to work, re-interviewing potential witnesses and reviewing evidence. But the trail seemed to go nowhere. Neighbors had not seen anything unusual on that fateful day, and the quiet low-crime neighborhood offered few clues. The lack of forced entry suggested that the person responsible for the crime was someone Leslie knew, but no one could pinpoint who that person might be. Leslie's family struggled with a lack of answers. Her husband, Sandy, was briefly considered a suspect, but was soon cleared. Lauren, convinced of her father's innocence, persisted in seeking justice for her mother, constantly urging detectives to keep the case alive. Years passed, and hope began to wane. The investigation into Leslie's case became one of Montgomery County's most challenging cold cases. Detectives, both seasoned and new, took turns sifting through the old evidence, hoping for a breakthrough that never seemed to come. It was not until September 2022 that a glimmer of hope appeared. Investigators decided to submit the blood evidence from the crime scene to Othram. This decision would eventually lead to the long-awaited breakthrough that would crack the case wide open and bring Leslie's perpetrator to justice. The lab was able to develop a more complete DNA profile of the suspect, which was then sent to Family Tree DNA, a consumer-based genealogy company. The results pointed to the Gligor surname, leading detectives to reconnect this lead with an old tip about a man connected to the Pryor family, Eugene Gligor. Leslie's daughter, Lauren Pryor, was 16 years old when she first met Eugene. They were classmates at Bethesda's Chevy Chase High School and quickly became an inseparable couple. Eugene, with his deep brown hair and wide smile, was popular and well-liked among their peers. He had dreams of becoming a computer engineer and often participated in social activities. Eugene's family life was turbulent. He struggled with his parents' divorce and had relatives known for their volatile tempers. Despite these challenges, Eugene maintained a facade of normalcy, never displaying violent tendencies around Lauren or her family. Their families lived close by, which meant Eugene was frequently at the Pryor home. Leslie and Sandy welcomed him, treating him almost like a second son. Eugene joined them on family trips to the Outer Banks and Delaware beaches, where they played board games and built fond memories. While Leslie always spoke fondly of Eugene, Sandy had reservations, sensing something off about him. Although, he never had any concrete reasons to justify his unease. In June 2024, investigators collected Eugene's DNA from a discarded water bottle they saw him use and discard at Dulles International Airport. It was then confirmed it matched the DNA found at the crime scene. This led to his arrest on June 18, 2024, bringing a significant step towards justice to the long, cold case. Now 44 years old, Eugene Gligor faces first-degree charges and was extradited from Washington, D.C. to Maryland. The arrest of Eugene Gligor for the slaying of Leslie Pryor brought a mix of shock and relief to everyone, but especially to her daughter, Lauren. The revelation that Leslie's former boyfriend was the suspected perpetrator added an agonizing layer of personal betrayal to an already devastating ordeal. She had been in a relationship with Gligor for 5 years but had not spoken to him in several years by the time of her mother's tragic death. Shortly after the funeral, Lauren recalled an unexpected encounter with him at a bar in Bethesda. She told him about her mother's passing, and his response was chillingly composed. He simply looked at her and said, "I am so sorry. I have spoken to him. He did not seem weird. How you can look somebody in the eye, knowing you committed this crime, and act like nothing happened is pretty unreal," Lauren later reflected. Despite the long-awaited breakthrough in the case, authorities have yet to establish a clear motive for the brutal killing. Gligor remains in custody without bond. Prosecutors have cited his history of frequent international travel, labeling him a flight risk. As they await the trial, the Pryor family and their community continue to seek justice for Leslie, hoping that more answers will soon come to light. Moving on to the next case. Matthew Weaver Jr. 21-year-old Matthew Weaver Jr. of Simi Valley, California, should have been looking forward to adulthood. Instead, in the period leading up to his mysterious disappearance in 2018, he seemed to be going through a personal crisis. Shortly before he went missing, Matthew moved out of the home he had shared with his stepmother and into his own apartment in Granada Hills, California. Some sources suggest he had been kicked out, though this remains unconfirmed. Around the same time, he also ended his long-term relationship with his girlfriend, Vanessa. These abrupt changes created instability in his life, leaving his job and friendships as his only sources of consistency. At the time of his disappearance, Matthew was working as a lineman for a telephone pole construction company alongside his father, Matthew Weaver Sr. His ex-girlfriend noted that after moving into his new apartment, he had started drinking more frequently. His friends noticed the changes as well. Matthew had become a frequent partygoer, and over time, he began experimenting with drugs. He started regularly using LSD and cocaine, and before long, his substance use became a growing concern. Matthew admitted to his friends that his drug use was becoming problematic, as it was not only affecting his daily life but also interfering with his job. He had begun missing shifts, and at one point, his father reportedly caught him using. Things took a more troubling turn in the months leading up to his disappearance when Matthew started asking around for a gun. His friends refused to help him obtain one, and since he was unable to purchase one himself, he asked his father if he could either borrow a firearm or have one bought for him. However, Matthew Sr. declined. On August 9, 2018, after another night of partying, Matthew slept in late. Around 6 p.m., he drove to his workplace to collect $400 in cash from his father. While here, he asked if he could take a photo of his gun, and his father agreed. Matthew posted the image of the gun in his hand to Snapchat with the words "Game Over" on it. At 9 p.m., Matthew called a friend named Melissa Sanchez. He picks her up from her home in Chatsworth, and the pair drove to Walmart, purchased gas, and then drove to an unidentified location where they purchased cocaine. From here, they headed to a marijuana dispensary. Together, the two sat in Matthew's car outside of Melissa's home. According to Melissa, the two were new friends, which is why she found it odd and awkward when Matthew began emotionally venting to her in the car before crying. She eventually left the 21-year-old alone in his car at 5 a.m. At 5:15 a.m., Matthew turned off the 101 freeway and got onto Mulholland Highway. At 6:57, he stopped at a parking lot at Stunt Road in Topanga Canyon. This area was a popular lookout spot that the 21-year-old was very familiar with, as his ex Vanessa claimed he visited it frequently. Matthew sat in the lot for about 16 minutes. At 7:15 a.m., he opened the large unlocked metal gates that led to an asphalt road named Topanga Tower Motorway, which later forked and led to a large microwave tower that was being built at the time. CCTV from the area showed that Matthew did indeed drive down this dirt road, and he was the only one who did. His car was later found at the end of the road, which was so narrow that one of his tires was hanging off the edge of the mountain. The front of his car had been blocked by a small boulder, and there was nowhere to turn the vehicle around. At 8:21 a.m., the 21-year-old attempted to call his father. However, Matthew Sr. had no signal at the time, so he missed the call. A few hours later at 11:48, he called Melissa, who was unable to answer because she was at work. She did, however, text him asking what was up. Matthew replied, quote, "Like some crazy is going on, and then, quote, I just to talk while I have the chance." His phone was either turned off or ran out of battery after this message. Melissa asked him if he was okay, but Matthew never replied. Between 7:28 and 11:48 a.m., Matthew remained in the same area. His whereabouts since he last contacted Melissa, however, are unknown. He has never been seen or heard from again. A publication named The Local Malibu reported that on August 11th at around 1 a.m., cries for help were heard in the Roses Overlook area, a section of the trail near to where Matthew's car was found. While a search ensued, no trace of the 21-year-old or anyone else was found, and scent dogs reportedly lost the trail they'd been following. The only clues in Matthew's case come from drone images of the area in which he went missing. 797 photos were taken by the drone's pilots, and a reward is being offered to those who can find relevant clues by analyzing the images. This method was used to find a white torn t-shirt with dried blood on it, and a hat also with dried blood on it. While the hat conclusively belongs to Matthew, the t-shirt remains unconfirmed as belonging to the 21-year-old. Friends and family of Matthews do not believe he had to take his own life. However, given his erratic behavior, his emotional states, and his final Snapchat message, which read "Game over," it may not be the most far-fetched theory. Other speculation includes that Matthew got into a fight with a construction worker while on the site of the tower, as laborers there were known to be hostile. Meanwhile, the 21-year-old's new friend Melissa reportedly had gang connections. She was the last one to hear from Matthew and the last one to see him alive, prompting some to question whether or not she had something to do with his sudden disappearance. It's also been asked why he chose to speak with her specifically rather than his other much closer friends. Matthew's friends have said they believe he wanted a gun for his own protection, not so he could take his own life. They believe he posted the image to Snapchat to let people know he had won, not as some kind of final goodbye. Matthew's family and friends remain determined to find answers. If you're interested in assisting with the analysis of drone images related to his case, you can visit MatthewWeaver.tips. Matthew was last seen on August 10, 2018, near the Topanga Tower motorway, close to Roses Overlook, above the Backbone Trail and Hondo Canyon areas in California. At the time of his disappearance, he was 21 years old, with brown hair and brown eyes. He stood 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighed approximately 130 pounds. If you have any information regarding his whereabouts, you can contact the Los Angeles Regional Crime Stoppers at 22. Now that you know the details, feel free to share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Moving on to the next case. Sharon Christine Anderson. Sharon Christine Anderson, affectionately known as Sherry by her friends and family, was a 50-year-old mother and a dedicated employee of the Washington State Department of Social and Health Services. She resided in Stanwood, Washington, a peaceful town north of Seattle's suburbs. Sherry was the proud mother of 2 adult children and adored her 2 grandsons. She had been married to her husband, John, a Boeing employee, for approximately 6 years. According to her best friend, Mary, the couple had no known relationship issues, and if anyone truly knew Sherry, it was Mary. Mary described Sherry as her adopted sister, emphasizing that they spoke on the phone every night at 9:30 p.m. before going to bed. In their free time, Sherry and John shared a passion for Harley-Davidsons and often rode motorcycles together. Sherry filled her days as a devoted social worker and a loving mother and grandmother. At DSHS, she worked with adult clients striving to become self-sufficient after being on welfare. Though the job was demanding, it was also deeply fulfilling, and she had been committed to it for 15 years. Sherry's co-workers described her as reliable and hardworking. She was especially proud of her youngest daughter, who had recently graduated from college. She also cherished time with her daughter Nikki's 2 sons and spoke to them frequently. On December 2, 2000, Sherry had a busy day ahead. She planned to run errands near her home in Stanwood before heading south to Everett for some Christmas shopping at the mall. Before leaving, she told her husband, John, that she would return by 4 or 4:30 p.m., as they had evening plans. That night, Sherry and John were set to go out, planning to leave their home around 5 or 5:30 p.m. to drive to Seattle for dinner and a motorcycle show. She left the house around 9 a.m., driving her new Toyota 4Runner, bringing only her purse and a coat. It was also known that Sherry typically carried a gun for personal protection. Sherry's firearm was legally registered and kept in her vehicle. According to her daughter Nikki, Sherry's morning errands included stopping at McDonald's for a coffee, something she did almost daily, then heading to Fred Meyer in Marysville to pick up some developed photos, followed by a trip to Walmart. Afterward, she planned to drive up to Everett for Christmas shopping. The distance from Stanwood to the Everett Mall was about 30 miles, a drive that would take roughly 30 minutes. It is unclear how Sherry's husband, John, spent most of that day, but at some point in the mid-afternoon, he took a nap. When he woke up around 5:30 p.m., he was surprised that Sherry hadn't woken him as expected. Looking around the house, he realized she was nowhere to be found, and her car had not returned home. Concerned, he called Mary around 5:30 p.m. to ask if she had heard from Sherry. Mary, too, had not spoken to her best friend all day. Both John and Mary emphasized that Sherry was extremely dependable and always called if she was running late, yet that day, there had been no word from her at all. At that point, Mary, Sherry's daughter Nikki and other family members began driving to the places that Sherry would have gone that day. At 10 p.m. that evening, Mary found Sherry's Toyota 4Runner parked in the Mervyn's department store parking lot at Everett Mall. The car was parked only about 50 feet from the entrance. However, there were no Christmas presents in the car, and alarmingly Sherry's cell phone and the gun she carried for protection were both found inside the locked vehicle. At this point, Sherry was reported missing to the Everett Police Department, and while the SUV was accounted for and verified as hers, no further leads were gathered that were publicly released. Volunteers in groups of 10 to 80 people scoured the area around the mall as well as nearby roadways, parks, bodies of water, and railroad trusses, but no sign of Sherry was ever recovered. Reports differ on whether or not police believe foul play was to blame in Sherry's case, with some newspapers reporting that Sherry's disappearance was suspicious and foul play was likely, while other media outlets report that foul play is not suspected, and still others say that the police simply do not have enough information to point them in either direction. Friends and family have kept Sherry's story alive and have printed thousands of missing persons flyers which have been posted all around the Seattle area, especially all around Snohomish County. Police have remarked that they are impressed by the determination shown by Sherry's friends and family to find her. Because of the missing flyers, police frequently get reported sightings of Sherry, although most of them have led back to a local woman who looks similar to Sherry. Many reports claim that there is a website dedicated to Sherry's disappearance. However, it does not seem to be in operation currently. According to one account, it is not believed that Sherry made it to the mall that day, but rather that something happened to her before she got to the entrance between her car and the mall. CCTV footage was unable to be acquired, and it's unknown why police chose not to procure the footage before it was automatically deleted. Mary says there is reason to believe that Sherry's car was abandoned in the mall parking lot between 6:30 and 7 p.m. that day, about 3 hours before the car was found. In a different report, police claims that no one saw Sherry that day after the morning hours and say that the last confirmed sighting of her was when she left her house that morning at 9 a.m. in Stanwood. Because information on this case is sparse, it is unknown if Sherry ever made it to Fred Meyer or McDonald's that day. It is also unknown exactly when her credit card, bank account, or phone was last used and whether it was on the 1st or the December 2nd. Friends and family are certain that Sherry would not have walked away from her life. She had no large debts, no marital or criminal problems, and had never given any indication that she was depressed or otherwise wanted to run away from her life. Moreover, Sherry's credit cards and bank account have not been touched since the day that she went missing. Any hope that Sherry was alive waned when the holidays came and went without her making contact. Mary and Nikki both call the county coroner's office whenever an unidentified body has been found, hoping that perhaps at long last Sherry has been found, and with her answers long awaited, but so far there have been no matches. The sister and best friend of Sherry also check local pawn shops for Sherry's distinct wedding set. Her wedding ring was a custom design. In the middle is a white diamond flanked by black onyx. The stones are set in white gold. Sherry's ring has never been recovered from any pawn shops nor jewelers. Sadly, in the years since she disappeared, nothing more has been revealed. About 1 year after Sherry's disappearance, John filed for divorce, saying that he needed to move on with his life. Very little information is available about what John was doing that day, and at first glance, he seems like a viable suspect according to some close to the case. However, there has been no reporting to indicate that he is being pursued as a suspect, and Sherry's family members and friends have never made any negative remarks or pointed fingers at John. Those following the case say it is hard to determine if John really is a suspect, but as he has not been further investigated, it is possible that he had an alibi or was ruled out by some other measure not released to the media. In fact, the only person Mary is suspicious of is a client who had specifically threatened Sherry 2 weeks prior to her disappearance. Mary maintains that this person has never even been interviewed by police. Sherry is featured in a deck of cards given to inmates in Washington jails and prisons. She is on the 8 of clubs, and it is the hope of family and friends that the deck may generate interest in the cold case, although no leads have come from this yet. Sadly, at this point in time, Sherry remains one of the approximately 4,000 missing or murdered Indigenous people whose cases are not yet solved in this country. Sherry is described as a biracial woman. She is Caucasian as well as Native American. She is a registered Cherokee Indian. Sherry had long, wavy brown or black hair that cascaded down her back and deep brown eyes. She stood about 5 feet 8 inches tall and weighed between 130 and 150 pounds. In February of that year, she was 50 years old. At the time of her disappearance, she was last seen wearing white tennis shoes, a green coat, blue jeans, and her distinctive custom-designed wedding rings. She may also have used the last name Sibin. Many have criticized law enforcement for relying solely on her husband's account regarding whether Sherry ever actually left the house that day. Given that statistically, female homicide victims are often killed by their male partners, some believe investigators should have scrutinized John more closely. Additionally, when discussing the case, John has faced backlash for making statements about moving on as early as a year after her disappearance, comments that some interpret as him emotionally distancing himself from the situation. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Sharon Christine Anderson, please contact the Everett Police Department at 425-257-8483. A $20,000 reward is being offered for any information leading to her recovery. Moving on to the next case. Stacy Smart. Stacy Smart, 52, resided near Pine Cove Marina by Lewiston Lake in Lewiston, California, alongside her boyfriend, Tony Brand. In the weeks leading up to Halloween in October 2016, Stacy's mother attempted to contact her multiple times, but her calls went unanswered. Adding to the concern, the home phone had been disconnected. As Halloween passed without any word from Stacy, her family grew increasingly worried. She typically spent the holiday with loved ones at her daughter Nicole Santos' home, making her absence all the more alarming. The following day, Nicole set out to find her mother, reaching out to Stacy's friends, only to learn that none of them had seen her in weeks. On November 2, 2016, the family officially reported her missing to the Trinity County Sheriff's Office. While Stacy's family last spoke to her before Halloween, they hadn't physically seen her since October 12th, when she was at home with her boyfriend. Tony Brand, one of the last known people to have seen her, became a central figure in the case. They both were last seen at a neighbor's birthday party on October 15th. After the party, one of the neighbors had apparently seen Stacy and Tony fighting. A month before she had gone missing, Stacy had called her mother and told her that Tony was cheating on her. The two would reportedly patch things up later on. The family tried to get a hold of Tony, but they weren't able to get in touch with him until the November 8th, almost a week after Stacy was reported missing. When the family questioned Tony, he merely claimed that Stacy had left and he didn't know where she was. The family decided to contact people that had regular contact with Tony and Stacy. One claimed that Tony had told him that Stacy had moved out 2 weeks prior, and another person said that Tony had told him that Stacy had gotten violent and he had to make her move. When Stacy's daughter and son-in-law inquired again, Tony changed his story. He said that Stacy had been back to his house several times and had left behind several notes. When Nicole asked if she could see the notes, Tony said that he didn't know where the notes were. The family also noticed that part of the carpet was missing from the bedroom that Tony and Stacy shared. Tony said that he and Stacy had cut out a piece to make a nice entry to the master bedroom, and he had made a design there with pieces of carpet. The forensic scientist inspected the carpet and confirmed that the carpet had been pieced into a design and didn't find anything suspicious about the carpet. Tony was brought in for questioning by the police as he was the last person to see Stacy. He again claimed that she had just left and that she had done it before, and that's why he didn't find it troubling. Initially, Tony refused to take a polygraph test, but he would later agree to take the test. However, on the day of the test, he didn't show up. He hasn't been asked by the sheriff's office to take a lie detector test since. The police said Tony had been fully cooperative in the case besides the polygraph test. Stacy's bank card was last used on October 16th, the day after she was reportedly seen at that party with Tony. If Stacy did leave, then why hasn't she used her bank card since? There were several reported sightings of her after her disappearance in front of the Weatherville gas station. She was reported to be with an older man in a green SUV. However, none of the sightings have been confirmed. Authorities conducted an extensive search of Tony Brand's property and the surrounding area, employing sonar, cadaver dogs, and the assistance of numerous volunteers. Despite their efforts, no trace of Stacy was found. Her disappearance coincided with that of Sherry Papini, a case that occurred just 45 miles away and garnered widespread media attention. Investigators explored the possibility of a connection between the two cases but ultimately found no evidence linking them. While Stacy was officially reported missing on November 2, 2016, the same day as Sherry, she had not actually been seen since October 15th. Unlike Sherry Papini, who was eventually found, Stacy remains missing. Law enforcement has not ruled out foul play, but no arrests have been made in connection with her case. Her family strongly believes she did not leave voluntarily, especially since she had 2 daughters, one just 10 years old at the time, and cherished spending holidays with them. To this day, Stacy's whereabouts remain unknown. Moving on to the next case. Susanna Brown. On the evening of March 8, 1982, Susanna Brown attended a Tupperware party near her home in Abilene, Texas. Meanwhile, her daughter, Francesca, stayed at their neighbor Kathy Spivey's house. Francesca asked Kathy if she could sleep over, but Kathy, being a mother herself, declined, reminding her it was a school night and suggesting they plan something for the weekend instead. Around 8:30 p.m., Susanna picked up Francesca and took her home. The following morning, Billy Brown returned from work at nearly 3:20 a.m., unaware of the nightmare that awaited him. As he switched on the lights, his eyes were immediately drawn to the sight of blood. Then, he saw his wife, Susanna, lying lifeless, partially concealed under the bed. In shock, he passed by the phone in the living room and rushed to the kitchen to dial 911. When officers arrived, they made a horrifying discovery. His 8-year-old stepdaughter, Francesca Antoinette Martinez, had also been murdered inside the house. It was a grim discovery, but investigators immediately noticed something unusual. Susanna was found lying face up in her bedroom, a lamp cord still attached to the lamp and wrapped tightly around her neck. Francesca had also been strangled with a ligature. Her body was discovered in her bedroom with a phone cord, cut in 2 places, wrapped around her neck. Both ligatures were everyday household items, suggesting a crime of opportunity rather than a carefully planned attack. Given that strangulation is an intensely personal and deliberate act, authorities suspected the perpetrator likely knew the victims. The medical examiner later determined that male DNA fluid was present in Susanna's mouth. However, it appeared to have been rinsed off, making it unclear whether it was consensual or connected to the crime. Additionally, Susanna had sustained 3 large lacerations on the left side of her head, indicating that the attacker had struck her multiple times with the lamp before strangling her. Her white V-neck t-shirt and bra were slightly torn, while her blue shorts had been pulled down around her ankles. Despite these details, there was no evidence of sexual assault. It was noted that little Francesca had been hiding under the bed. The way her body was found, it appeared the attacker found and dragged her out. Interestingly, Billy told police at the time that the back door was slightly open and a window was open 5 to 6 inches. This looked staged as all the screen doors were intact, in fact shut. Officers could find no signs of breaking and entering, not even a scratch on the door, and there was nothing missing from the house. For a man struck with such misfortune, Billy seemed unfazed. He was calm, not too upset, and even made inappropriate dad jokes. That is when he turned from the affected loved one to their number 1 suspect. Investigators first wanted to know more about Susanna Flores Brown. For parents Nick Flores and Frances Soda, Susanna was a Texas girl through and through. Born on October 20, 1951 in Taylor County, Texas. She had 2 sisters, a half-sister and a half-brother. Susanna was loved and adored by all. When she was only 16 years old, she fell in love, but the man she chose was 10 years older than her, 26-year-old Freddie Martinez. In 1967, they got married. They were blissfully married for a long time. Freddie was in the Marine Corps, a lance corporal in the U.S. Army. He served in the Vietnam War up until 1973 when the war was over. For Freddie, 1973 would turn out to be an eventful year. In January, as the Paris Peace Accords were signed and troops were withdrawn, Freddie lost his father. But by the end of the year, some light came into his life. On December 11, 1973, he was blessed in the form of little Francesca Antoinette Martinez, his baby girl. Francesca was affectionately known as Cha-Cha because of her fun spirit. She studied at Bonham Elementary School in Abilene. The mother and daughter were happy and loved, but unfortunately, as often happens with teen marriages, their marriage did not work out. The couple separated with Susanna keeping Francesca. Susanna was very busy with her daughter who loved to dance and be involved in just about everything. For a while, it was just the 2 of them until 1979 when Billy Brown entered their lives. One night at a nightclub, she met a handsome man who took her heart. Billy worked at Nucorp and appeared to be a loving family man. Susanna's sisters noticed the relationship turning sour very quickly. He was a flirt and a womanizer. Linda Flores and Rita Flores Lafferty believed he was cheating on her repeatedly. Susanna tried to attribute it to them being racist, and even explained how he was different and kind, but the sisters still did not like him. Once, they were all out with their dates at a nightclub when Linda came across the couple arguing. She saw Billy push Susanna hard, knocking her down. The couple had been in a relationship for around 3 years. Susanna's family described Billy as controlling and abusive. Susanna was in significant danger from Billy as detailed by her siblings. Richard Flores, Susanna's half-brother, arrived at the crime scene after hearing about the double slaying. He noticed that Billy did not show any remorse at all and was laughing and joking about a bottle of whiskey Richard had left there about a week before. For Richard, the way Billy distanced himself from any emotions at all was a big red flag. Rowan Flores Beats, Susanna's half-sister, recalled Susanna expressing reluctance about being intimate with Billy. Susanna mentioned that Billy could become ugly or moody and make short and snotty remarks throughout the day if she did not perform in bed to his liking. The news of Susanna wanting to leave the relationship, coupled with Billy's alleged anger over intimacy issues, helped investigators identify a possible motive. Billy told the police that he had been trying to call Susanna for quite a while before he was finally able to get a hold of her. Investigators could paint a picture of what might have occurred. When Susanna did not answer the phone, his feelings of insecurity, jealousy, and control took over, sparking an argument that escalated into something more serious. Sarah Sato, a close cousin of Susanna, told investigators that in the summer of 1981, she escorted Susanna to the hospital. Susanna allegedly claimed that she and Billy Brown got into a fight that led to her suffering a miscarriage. The officers strongly believed there was physical abuse in the relationship. Things got heated often, and investigators discovered Susanna had once called the police in November of 1981 afraid of Billy. They had a domestic issue, and allegedly Billy had gone to see another woman. He laughed it off with the police, saying Susanna had poured dirt in his car's gas tank as revenge. Then, realizing it was too much and perhaps she crossed the line, she called the police, fearing Billy's reaction. Susanna confided in her family that she did not want to marry Billy or live in Texas due to the common law marriage laws. While Susanna and Billy were not married by Texas, unwillingness was evident. According to court documents, she refused to take his last name until shortly before her end, only doing so under his pressure. A few weeks before her untimely end, Susanna asked her mother for money to change the locks. About a week before the tragedy, she asked her siblings if they could get her a gun. Richard Flores further explained that he knew something nobody else did. Susanna was trying to leave Billy, and he was very upset about it, threatening her. She went to Richard, told him everything, and asked him to help her buy a gun. It was almost as if Susanna knew something, as if she knew what was to come. As investigators zeroed in on Billy, interrogating him, he produced an alibi. He claimed he left for his job at the Newcorp Manufacturing Company at around 4:30 p.m. on March 8th. He clocked in at 5 p.m. and clocked out at 3 a.m. the following morning. Investigators met with his alibi, Josie Landos, a Newcorp employee. It was rumored that Billy Brown was cheating on Susanna with Josie. Josie was cooperative and admitted it would be easy for Billy to slip out of work as the nature of his job allowed him to leave undetected. Other employees, including co-workers named James Coffey and Larry Skiles, confirmed it was highly possible, which further reduced Billy's alibi. Back in 1982, Billy could not be convicted due to lack of evidence. Little did the officers know they, in fact, did possess evidence. It just needed DNA analysis. The case ended up in the unsolved pile until years later in February 2012 when Abilene police asked Billy to come in for an interview. He did not show up or agree to give a DNA sample. 10 years later, on the January 17, 2023, the oral swab from Susanna's mouth was processed, and there was no question. It was Billy. The investigators wanted to speak to Billy. They confronted him outside his house, but he took it very lightly. Billy sat down for a 2-hour interview with the police where he denied all allegations and said he loved his wife. He denied any domestic violence. He also denied any miscarriage, saying Susanna had an abortion in 1981 by her own will. When he denied giving a DNA sample, he was served a warrant, and the DNA sample was taken by force. Billy was reportedly heard saying, "I have signed my own ending." He also claimed that since breaks at work were only 30 minutes long, he could not have made the drive back and forth to their Abilene home to commit the crime since it took 18 minutes to drive one way. He also passionately denied any relations with Susanna, saying he did not enjoy this particular act in bed. He was not aware that the officers had carried out a DNA analysis. It was Billy's bodily fluid in Susanna's mouth. Despite this, he profusely denied having done the deed with Susanna. He also said that it was possible Susanna was cheating on him with her ex at the time, trying to turn the police elsewhere. He said he got fried chicken for dinner, ate with his family, and left for work. When officers asked him why he did not call the police from the living room phone, he did not miss a beat and retorted with, "Did Francesca not have a phone cord around her neck?" There was no question about it. The perpetrator was Billy. Officers pieced together what they believed had happened. Billy had meticulously planned the crime, slipped away from work, and taken Susanna's life before killing Francesca to eliminate any witnesses. On October 27, 2023, just 2 days after speaking with Susanna's sisters, police arrested Billy Brown on charges of homicide. However, he was released the following day on a $200,000 bond. Billy later stated that his only concern after all these years was whether Susanna had been unfaithful to him with her ex. When approached by reporters for a statement, Billy merely laughed it off. Meanwhile, Susanna's sister Linda expressed her disbelief through tears, saying, "I didn't get my hopes up because it's been so long. I just thought, there's no way they can do this. It's been 41 years. To hear this news, it's just unbelievable. It feels like a dream." A trial date has yet to be determined, but after more than 4 decades, Susanna and Francesca may finally receive the justice they deserve. Moving on to the next case. Terry Becker. On December 6, 1975, a chilling discovery sent shockwaves through the quiet town. 2 motorcyclists, out for a ride, stumbled upon a lifeless body in a secluded field near the intersection of 100th Avenue and Lowell Boulevard. Unbeknownst to them, this grim find would mark the beginning of an unsolved mystery that would haunt the community for nearly half a century. The victim was identified as Terry Becker. She had grown up in Casper alongside her parents, a brother, and a sister. A graduate of Kelly Walsh High School, she briefly worked for a newspaper before moving to Denver. According to her family, Terry lived life on the edge. She never met a stranger and could strike up a conversation with anyone. She had a love for painting and music, embracing creativity and spontaneity. On December 4, 1975, Terry Becker was last seen alive hitchhiking to Brighton, Colorado, intending to visit her boyfriend, who was incarcerated at Adams County Jail. While reports indicated that she successfully made it to the detention center, her movements after that remained a mystery. Just 2 days later, her body was discovered in a desolate field. It appeared that her remains, along with her clothing and personal belongings, had been discarded at the site. An autopsy later confirmed that Terry had been sexually assaulted and strangled to death. Despite multiple investigations over the years, the case remained unsolved until February 2003, when authorities were able to extract a DNA sample from evidence collected at the crime scene. The profile was entered into CODIS, but no matches were found. A breakthrough came in February 2013 when the Las Vegas Metro Police Department was reviewing the 1991 murder of Sherry Bridgewater, who had been found raped and murdered in her apartment. When they submitted DNA evidence from the crime scene to CODIS, they made a startling discovery. It matched the unknown suspect in Terry Becker's murder. It was determined the suspect who murdered Terry Becker also murdered Sherry Bridgewater in Las Vegas. However, they did not know the suspect's identity at the time. In February 2018, the case was submitted for genetic genealogy testing to identify a match through hereditary DNA analysis. After 5 years of research and testing, Thomas Martin Elliott was identified as a suspect in both murders. In October 2023, his body was exhumed and was positively identified as the killer in both cases in January 2024. Elliott had an extensive criminal history, spending much of his life cycling in and out of prison. Before murdering Terry Becker, he had committed a burglary in Lakewood, for which he was ultimately sentenced to 6 years behind bars. While incarcerated, he was transferred between various facilities within the Department of Corrections system before being released in Las Vegas in 1981. Following his release, Elliott went on to commit a crime against a child, resulting in a 10-year prison sentence. He was once again released in 1991, at which point he murdered Sherry Bridgewater. However, before authorities could bring him to justice for his crimes, Thomas Elliott took his own life on October 30, 1991. Investigators are now working to retrace his movements in an effort to determine whether he may be connected to additional unsolved cases. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video, and remember, the search for truth never stops.